Welcome, future AI innovators, to the SmythOS immersive course. I'm Sebastian Schieke, and I'll be your guide through this exciting journey into AI technology. Let me give you a quick roadmap of what's ahead. The journey you are going to embark on will help you transform from a curious beginner to a well-trained SmythOS AI agent developer. Here's what you can look forward to. In Module 1, we will lay the foundation, exploring the history of AI, and we will dive into the SmythOS basics. You will build your first agent and chatbot, getting hands-on right from the start. Module 2 will ramp up things with advanced prompting techniques, data handling, and debugging. You will learn to speak the language of AI with confidence. Module 3, it's all about integration and APIs. We connect SmythOS to the wider digital world, opening up endless possibilities for your AI creations. In Module 4, we'll explore data pools, build intelligent chatbots, and dive into advanced features that will take your agents to the next level. In Module 5, we will cap it off with real-world applications, security considerations, and a glimpse of the future of AI. By the end, you will be ready to innovate in ways you never thought possible. This course is designed to be hands-on and practical. You will be building, experimenting, and problem-solving every step of the way. So, are you ready to revolutionize your AI skills? Let's dive in and start our journey into the world of SmythOS. In our first module, we'll cover everything from the basics of generative AI to the advanced techniques in SmythOS. You can look forward to a deep dive into the SmythOS user interface, step-by-step guides on creating agents and workflows. You will master chatbot functionality and deploy and refine your creations. In this first video, we will dive into the world of generative AI, its history, and its current landscape. Let's start by hearing from our expert, Mike Sale, on the evolution of AI.
First thing I want to do is talk about the agenda. The agenda for today, we're going to start within this first session is just going over generative AI specifically. It's important to kind of understand where we have the context for what it is that we're doing and how we got here, just so that you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. The other thing we're going to cover is AI orchestration and SmythOS specifically. Okay, so what you will learn when you are finished with this course, you will absolutely be able to build agents, including chatbots and agents that can interact with APIs and that can actually be the exercise or the webhook for example, when someone a form on your website and that form is submitted, oftentimes there's a capability of adding webhooks. Those webhooks can then be used to do that. You will be capable of building agents and integrating them as chatbots, APIs, and if we have the time and the interest, we will also create a ChatGPT GPT that you can then use and share with others that's actually for SmythOS. Okay. So generative AI, one thing that's important here is I want to provide a high-level history. Where do we come from and how did we get here? The first thing to understand is that AI is not new by any stretch of the imagination. It's been around since technically the 50s, really had some extra work in the 60s and 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, but a lot of that was really focused on machine learning, visual learning, things that were based almost more on completely on statistical models that had a statistical model usefulness, right? Where, in other words, where you would see statistics being used, you would find that machine learning would really help.
As Mike pointed out, AI has a long history, but recently there's been a significant shift. Let's hear more about this game-changing moment.
You would find that NLP could really help with certain things when you're trying to provide interactions, but they were very kind of rote and very structured to make that happen. So then one thing happened a few years ago now that really changed things, and that is that OpenAI made ChatGPT publicly available, and it started to absolutely blow people's minds. It changed people's perspective on AI. In fact, I would argue that if you talk to most people today, that when they think of AI, they no longer think of machine learning. They no longer think of things like neural networks, which, by the way, LLMs are. The What they think of is ChatGPT and large language models, specifically in the chat embodiment and the ability to have a conversational interaction with uh, uh, with a very, very complex system. All right. So with that, there was basically an explosion in interest, identification of opportunities, new ways that people hadn't even thought of, new companies being built. AI content absolutely floods the internet and becomes something that is a problem for Google and others, because it may fit the words, but it doesn't actually necessarily always have the best content because it's still very early. One of the things that came out of this is this whole concept. There's a whole career now of people who call themselves prompt engineers. That didn't exist before. And there were funding into new foundation models. There were absolutely existing foundation models from Meta and OpenAI before this, and Alexander and the team at Smith had been working with these early models long before ChatGPT became this big, huge thing on the market. So the other thing that happened is that generative AI applications specifically started to attract funding, and people started to learn very quickly that the cost and complexity of building applications doing this was, and when it was not just ChatGPT and a fun thing to interact with and answer questions, a new way to interact with content on the internet. And there was also kind of when you're building applications, there's a certain mindset and way of getting things done has been around since the 1950s. That mindset, which is a very structured way of looking at things and a very kind of deterministic way of saying, if this, then that, really has a very interesting place in the generative AI world, and it's not the same. SmythOS saw this mismatch and this need, and started building out something that's very, very different, something that can chain LLMs very easily, can integrate with data and processes, and brought forward a real honest-to-God implementation of agents, of AI agents. And we will actually be building some of those. And so I just wanted to give a good history before we jump in here. Now, just quickly talking about large language models and open source models, things like Llama and Facebook's model, Llama 3.1, has recently hit, and it's amazing in its capability. And there is absolutely a capability there that we've never seen before.
This shift has led to rapid advancements in what we call large language models, or LLMs. Mike, can you tell us more about the current leaders in this field?
OpenAI is absolutely considered to be the leader with large language models. Anthropic Claude, though, Anthropic, and specifically through what they call Claude, and currently Claude Sonnet 3.5, have really taken the application market specifically to a new level, because the way that they've trained things, the way that they've fine-tune things in particular, makes it very, very good for generating content, and in some ways superior to OpenAI 4.0. However, everything is changing. We're moving into a multimodal world where it's no longer just about text and interpreting visuals, but truly being able to interact with multiple kinds of content as we move forward. So there is also, we see Google AI summaries coming into search. So no longer just go, they see that the potential that, for example, people will go to ChatGPT to answer questions because it provides clear, concise, capable answers. So they've actually integrated generative AI into their search results. Then one thing that really became clear is that generative AI by itself had a problem in that it was really focused on generation based on what it had already learned, and the rise of this thing called RAG, or retrieval augmented generation, allowed you to actually bring your content into a large language model, which, I mean, a large language model in its foundations from the ground up really requires about a year and millions of dollars to actually build a new model. They're getting better and better at that, but they are very expensive to build a foundation model. So RAG has been one of the things that has come to actually combine generative AI with retrieval of information and then combining them into one experience with the LLM. So one of the other things that came along here, I apologize for the funky thing here, the funky build, but Perplexity is the first kind of very interesting AI search engine, generative AI search engine, where you can actually go and have a quasi Google-like experience, but with things that actually use generative AI and identify sources. It's a very unique search engine, and they are absolutely have gained a certain mind share in this process. And back even before we saw that OpenAI was clearly the leader, Google saw the threat of open movements and open source, in particular. I hesitate to call it open source because it's not really about open source, but open models in particular were a real threat to Google because they have the ability to progress much better and much faster because of their exposure, whereas Google had a kind of walled garden. So Google saw this threat, and a lot of what you're seeing, even in current advertising, is really Google's response to this, including things like the AI summaries in search results. So what are some of the use cases for the large language models? We have things like chatbots, machine translation, translations of one language to another, FAQs and not so frequent Q&A, customer service, and things like customer service chatbots, or of the ability to use chat or even other applications to get data out of very large data sources that people may not necessarily be experts in understanding how to retrieve that data out. LLMs can really help with that.
It's clear that competition in the space is driving innovation. But what can these models actually do? Let's explore some use cases.
So Google saw this threat, and a lot of what you're seeing, even in current advertising, is really Google's response to this, including things like the AI summaries in search results. So what are some of the use cases for the large language models? We have things like chatbots, machine translation, translations of one language to another, FAQs and not so frequent Q&A, customer service, and things like customer service chatbots, or of the ability to use chat or even other applications to get data out of very large data sources that people may not necessarily be experts in understanding how to retrieve that data out. LLMs can really help with that. HR and operations. Sometimes HR manuals can be very, very big and very, very vast, but you still need to be able to ask it specific questions. And sometimes word search is not enough. Well, LLMs can help pull that data out and make it very accessible and very capable. Same thing with operations manuals. You want to know how to execute a particular process. You want to know what to do. An LLM to actually generate the code for one of our code elements that we will build in one of our agents. And finally, there is so much. We have just touched the surface. These are some of the most common use cases. You have to think more in terms of the capabilities of what large models are capable of. And in them, you'll see things like language and content analysis, sentiment analysis, analysis of transcripts, like this very presentation that you're seeing now. We're getting a transcript. That transcript will be analyzed and used by an LLM to actually help provide more materials around this training. Textual analysis, summarization, editing of documents, generating content, recommendations for things in e-commerce, because it can look at and compare textual content and visual content and find more of what you want and make recommendations to you. And it can classify things, can start from the high level and tell you, yeah, this really belongs in this classification versus that classification. All sorts of very, very interesting models. And then there's things that are not necessarily it's not good at today. Fill those gaps. And actually, I think as we progress, we're seeing that large language models and generative AI specifically is bridging these gaps over time. So the first one is highly scripted interactions. So with highly scripted interactions, we have something where, for example, you want to make sure that whenever someone asks a question, like, for example, call center agents, they are trained when answering a question to read from a script. Well, LLMs like to generate content and to be a little bit more creative. So you have to be very, very cautious with how you build generative AI applications in highly scripted environments and actually build that scripting in with something like orchestration to make sure that you get exactly what you want. High-level problems that should break down into something very specific.
These applications are truly impressive, but it's important to note that LLMs aren't perfect. Mike, what are some limitations we should be aware of?
And that actually is something that we will see oftentimes when you try and generate, for example, a 5,000-word article with ChatGPT, and it goes off the rails, but it also has issues understanding, and there's things you can do, like take a moment and take things step by step. This is one of the key things that we have learned through interacting with LLMs, that you need to say to an LLM to force them to slow down and take things step by step, as opposed to jumping right into it. So there's a lot you could do with prompt engineering to temper some of these, some that you cannot. So for example, you cannot depend on an LLM to give you the answer to calculations that are not incredibly common. That's because the way that LLMs work, they don't actually do math. They do vectorization of content and then provide them a probable next content. That is not math in and of itself. When you hand it an equation as content, it vectorizes it and tries to find the next vector to go with it. That means that there are tools, like, for example, in Smith, you have a code component that can address something like this. So for example, when you're looking to say, well, I want to look at things from yesterday, it doesn't understand yesterday. You have to actually then provide it with a very, very specific timestamp in order for it to work with that when looking at other content. And then finally, long form content generation. I actually already mentioned this. Really, when you look at high level problems, This is one of the core problems that we have today. When we take a look at generating content, you have to really take things a piece at a time in order for it to do a great job. Smith has proven that it can generate very, very good content if you actually break things down. But if you try and give it everything all at once without a lot of information, it will produce sometimes comical information. So that is the end of the lecture. Now what I want to do is go ahead and switch over to showing you what SmythOS looks like. All right.
Understanding these limitations is crucial as we move forward with AI technologies. In our next video, we'll introduce SmythOS, a powerful tool for harnessing the potential of LLMs. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in the next lesson.